Welcome to another exciting edition of Plank of the Week. Here we are at the headquarters of Talk Radio TV, and we're ready to go for another blistering session of pointing out just exactly who has been the biggest plank, or indeed idiot, of the week. I've got Kevin O'Sullivan with me, I've got Emma Webb, Conservative commentator, and we've also got something new. We have Plank of the Week mugs, very kindly provided for us by Russell Quirk, who is an occasional plank panellist, and he'll be back soon. So thank you, Russell, for that. Emma, you haven't been here for a while. In fact, you haven't been in this particular studio with us at all, and you haven't been back into the building since probably the Plank of the Year list that we did back in December. So why don't you kick us off with the first plank?
Harry.
I mean, things don't change much, do they? I mean,
he's never gone away. He's always there.
Well, do you know, normally what we've been doing for this most of this year is if they haven't actually been named, Harry and Meghan, they've carried over, because we always carry over one. So this week we won't carry them over. You can give us Harry absolutely on his own.
Harry has done so many things this week that individually could have nominated him for Plank of the Week.
Yes.
But there's just a whole host of them. The latest one was him telling the Americans that their First Amendment is bonkers and therefore turning the entire United States against him, which is not surprising because Harry and Meghan have involved themselves with plenty of, well, I suppose you would say, online censorship campaigns, and Harry's was appointed to work on this at the Aspen Institute on disinformation.
This is where he's going to go out about disinformation.
So the mask
well, he can start with his own interview, can't he, with Oprah Winfrey, when they pointed out a few things that turned out not to be true.
The mask has really slipped because now he's essentially admitted that he doesn't believe in free speech. So that was very helpful. But he also did this interview, and that was something that had been drip-fed to us from this interview that he did with the actor Dax Shepard in the US.
What kind of a name is that, by the way? Dax.
I'd never heard of this guy before.
Well, apparently
he's
a former crackhead.
Yeah, he's an actor, right, who's had some troubles with substance abuse, I think is the way you have to put it nowadays. Originally from Michigan.
With crack.
Originally from Michigan. He's been in some stuff I've never heard of.
Yeah. Maybe Harry will interview him.
But he's another one of these guys. He's got over 1 million followers on Twitter. And he does this podcast where people lay their souls bare to him about how terrible it's been.
Oh, that's very Harry.
Almost all of them, of course, are celebrities. In one way, shape, or form.
Must have a listen to that as soon as I can.
Sounds
he
great.
he also released the trailer for his mental health Netflix series with Oprah called
The Me You Can't See.
Exactly, yes.
If only that were true. If only it was the me you can't see.
I played the trailer for it last night. Admittedly, I've had a couple of drinks through the day, but my wife will confirm I was literally weeping with laughter. Yeah. It was so funny.
He's also used,
it's ludicrous.
But he's also used the piece of footage from his mother's funeral of him walking behind the coffin, which he has previously said is something that causes him great pain. Now, I don't know whether he's in some form of therapy where they say you must keep talking about this, but I mean, he just needs to stop talking about it.
But it's a lack of self-awareness, because it's just so insensitive for him to have done this interview with Dax Shepard, where he was talking about his genetic pain inherited from the parenting of Charles to him, that he inherited from the Queen and Prince Philip.
He doesn't mind the inherited money, though, does he?
No.
Well,
I mean, the 30 million that he inherited, that's fine.
He's not breaking that cycle.
No.
This is what staff in the palace have come out and have been saying, that they should renounce all of their titles entirely, which I think would be the right thing for them to do if they hate the royal family so much. And to be honest, the bridge has been absolutely torched, hasn't it? Because he's done this in the gap between Prince Philip's funeral and coming back to the UK to unveil this memorial to Diana.
Right. There's now some...
There's
question marks now about whether he's going to do that, isn't there? Which would be extraordinary if he didn't.
I mean, I really don't know how he can possibly paddle back from it. But you know, it's the lack of self-awareness that makes him a plank, but it's just like sheer porridge for brains to say that he knows enough about the First Amendment to know that it's bonkers.
Yeah. Well, the First Amendment, is the first most important amendment in all of America.
In the US Constitution.
It is the basis of the country, and it really gets on my nerves when people talk. You and I know this, Mike, more than most people in this country. We go, "Oh, Britain, free speech. We've got free speech." You don't know about free speech in this country until you we go to America. They really have.
Yeah, we really don't have free speech.
But and actually, the First Amendment is not just about free speech either. It's also freedom to assemble, freedom of religion.
Protest, religion.
It's the basis of liberty.
It's freedom.
In the United
It's about
States.
freedom. And he said, he basically said, but it's a very simple amendment to read and understand. He said, well, I haven't been in the country long enough to fully understand it. You've been there a year.
Do you think, how about this for a thought? Do you think he meant the amendment actually gives them the right to bear arms? Do you think he got it wrong?
It's possible, but I think that he thinks that my or your or Emma's ability to criticise him in public and say what we like about him is an absolute affront to him, and him and Meghan should have some sort of proprietorial control about everything that is written or said or spoken about them. And you can tell this because they keep suing everyone left, right and centre. But I think, and so he not only, it's not only that he said I don't understand the First Amendment, he said it was bonkers.
Yes.
It's mad. That freedom of speech is mad and bonkers. So what we know about...
Do you know, I'm beginning to wonder, I'm sure he probably did mean the Second Amendment. This is what I'm now thinking.
But if you look at his work with Meghan on internet censorship and misinformation, he really doesn't believe in free speech.
No, he doesn't.
And the two of them are really lobbying behind the scenes. Archewell partnered with...
Archewell.
Is that how you say it?
It's Archewell.
Archewell.
I'm going with Archewell. Why not Archewell?
Well,
Archie's short for Archibald.
They take the I out, don't they?
They partnered with the UCLA centre that involves itself. They basically thinks that the internet is racist and involves itself with internet censorship.
I see.
And actually, that was another thing that came out this week.
These are also the same people, though. These are the same people who stunted up a series of newspaper cuttings as if they were real to put on the Oprah show, and they weren't. Not only were they not real, these were headlines that weren't written about her. They were also headlines from other newspapers around the world, Australia, America. Some of them didn't exist. I mean, literally just fake news, the very definition of fake news.
You can manipulate dim minds. This is a guy, Prince Harry, who couldn't pass his A-levels. He had to have special tuition after Eton in order to scrape through and get 2 A-levels so he could get into
And you
Sandhurst.
told me what they were in once.
One was in geography, I think, and one was in art or something. But he's stupendously...
Was it in American history?
No. He is stupendously academically ungifted.
Dim, I think is the word you're looking for.
He's just massively, criminally, unacceptably dim.
Yes, I think that's
they
right.
also... Archewell, partnered with Procter and Gamble.
Procter and Gamble, yes.
And they've also been criticised for that because Procter and Gamble sell face whitening cream.
They do.
They do.
And sell it to countries where people's faces aren't white,
and also they're one of the biggest suppliers of palm oil, apparently.
They are. Well, they're one of the greatest producers of beauty products, which everybody knows are one of the biggest pollutants in the world.
Well,
They also apparently are responsible for quite a lot of deforestation and quite a lot of pollution of the oceans in lots of different ways.
I think Meghan and Harry have far too much confidence in that they think that they are right.
Yes.
And that they can lecture to the rest of us about that. And I think it's really worrying because especially with the lack of, as you were saying about, the lack of free speech, they don't want anyone to criticise them. They don't want anybody to disagree with them on anything.
Also, they don't seem to mind having a go at people that they don't like. So, for example, if they were having a go at the royal family, that's fine. They can do that. So it's all very well to be kind and compassionate, which many of their followers, of course, are not. Some of the most ghastly, horrible abuse that people on the internet get is from Harry and Meghan's supporters.
Well, there have been lots of people who've been cancelled for criticising Meghan. People like Piers Morgan,
Piers
Sharon
Morgan.
Osbourne ended up in hot water because of it as well.
Right.
Exactly.
I don't think that they can see themselves as they really are.
But this claptrap that he comes out with on the me you can't see and to Dax Shepard and all that, it's classic Californian psychobabble nonsense. And of course, stupid people, it's very easy to manipulate them to sort of believe all this stuff that is real and true and important. So he's trapped in this kind of forum.
But it's all part of this industry, isn't it?
Idiocy.
It's like there's the race industry and there's the mental health industry, and we're not
but
supposed to criticise either one.
But he's buying it left, right and centre. He's being manipulated by the slightly cleverer but certainly not brilliant Meghan and all those other people. And we are getting this kind of weird, kind of hybrid version of Prince Harry. And he does not have the intellectual capacity to resist these forces of pathetic mindlessness that are engulfing him.
I'm amazed that he won't one day just wake up and go, Blimey.
Yeah.
Maybe I should get back to Britain.
My God, what have I done?
You do wonder. Hey, Kevin, who's your first plank?
It's the BBC.
Of course it is.
To do with Martin Bashir, who 25 years ago, of course, secured in 1995, I think it was, that iconic interview with Princess Diana. It has been emerging over the past year or so in fits and starts that he used the most disgusting underhand techniques to con Princess Diana into believing she ought to give this interview, making up bank statements to look, forging bank
documents
statements and showing them to us to say, look, this is your security staff, they've been selling these stories, telling her that Prince Charles was having an affair with Tiggy Leg Burke, the nanny of their children, and in fact Tiggy Leg Burke was pregnant, an absolute lie, telling her that members of the royal family were conspiring against her, were selling stories to the press. Total lies. So whether or not Martin Bashir actually behaved appallingly is not a matter of discussion.
It's not in question.
We know that. So the BBC, realising that there was big trouble coming on this front some months back, commissioned Lord Dyson, former Master of the Rolls, to conduct an independent inquiry into exactly what happened. Now, the results of that inquiry will come out later this week. We're on a Tuesday now. By the weekend, I predict that report will be in the public arena, and by all accounts, it's not going to be a happy day for the BBC.
No.
He is going.
Another unhappy day.
And Bashir will emerge as the villain of the year, and he fully deserves to. Meanwhile,
but he can't be the only one that knew, can he?
But,
is that what we're being expected to believe?
Well,
Bashir alone.
Well, no, because what you're talking about, the way he behaved was disgusting and reprehensible, and certainly not something the state broadcaster ought to be sponsoring. Of course, there are other executives on Panorama back there who have been named, and the then head of news, Lord Tony Hall of Birkenhead, who went on to become the Director General. The thing about the Bashir thing, it's like Watergate. The crime itself was pretty bad, terrible thing to do to a woman in distress, to manipulate her like that, to mind control her like that with fakery. But the real crime, of course, like Watergate, is not the crime, it's the cover-up. So Tony Hall is on the rack for trying to find scapegoats that were not Martin Bashir. He did admit that Bashir forged these documents and said something like a rare lapse by a man of complete integrity.
What, you mean a lapse of ethics?
Martin Bashir is quite clearly a toe rag of the lowest order. Now,
something that premeditated can't be a lapse.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason that I'm nominating the BBC is because they've taken a bad situation and made it much, much worse. It is now an absolute omni-shambles. So they also commissioned Panorama in a classic bit of navel gazing by the BBC to investigate itself. This programme was supposed to have come out
Didn't like what they found.
Last night on Monday. They canned that. Oh no, we're not going to show that because it turns out it didn't quite come up with the results they were looking for.
It may distress some members of the audience, particularly those that work at the BBC.
So there's a huge, exactly.
Their only audience, isn't it?
Well. So there's a huge backlash about this kind of awful moment of non-transparency and secrecy by the BBC, trying to cover up its own cover-up. And so strong has been that backlash that Tim Davie, the Director General, is now indicating, oh well, we will show it a bit later in the week. So it's just the BBC's unerring ability to never get anything right and to take any bad situation and make it 1,000 times worse. I mean, only the BBC could do this to itself. And this will be, mark my words, probably a worse scandal than Jimmy Savile. This, for the reputation of the BBC, this will be devastating.
I'm not sure it's going to be worse than Jimmy Savile.
Well,
I
think it will.
I take your point.
I think it will.
But I don't think it will. I mean, the thing is,
look at the money they made from that interview.
I know, but part of the problem with all of these types of historical stories is that an awful lot of people have no clue who Martin Bashir is. He hasn't done anything for a very long time. I think he ended up going off to work for NBC.
They remember Princess Diana.
Well, they won't if they weren't around, though. I mean, there's an awful lot of people, unfortunately, who weren't around then.
Right,
trust me, this is what's going to be the effect of this, is the BBC will sooner or later, because of this, struggle greatly to maintain the TV
I think there's no
licence fee.
question that it will add to their pain
And they may well lose the licence
and quite
fee over
rightly
it.
too. But also, I mean, they shouldn't allow Martin Bashir simply to totter off, and we might find out later that he's been given some compensation.
One of the reasons the BBC said it wouldn't show Panorama was because it could affect his health, and they had a duty of care. And so then they said, this was the beginning of this week, oh, by the way, Martin Bashir has left the BBC. So we assumed, because he got a copy of Dyson's report, and at the top as a courtesy, and on that same day, which was last Friday, was the day it was announced he's quit. So it was like, I look at this report, I can't tell, I'm going to look terrible, I hereby resign. Yeah. Then the BBC go, oh, no, he resigned a month ago. Why didn't you tell us?
Well,
why didn't you tell us?
I think they've also got a duty of care to tell us not only when he resigned, why he resigned, but also whether he's still on the payroll, because I bet you he is. Anybody
well, no, he's
gone
now, he's resigned.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean he's not on the payroll.
No, he's not on the
payroll.
People
leave the BBC. Hang on, people leave the BBC one day, come back the next day in a different way.
Well, he's not coming back.
I don't think he's coming back.
They've announced.
I'm not saying he's coming back, Kevin, but he may well still be being paid.
No, he's not, because they've announced it, that he's resigned and he's not getting any payoff.
Really?
Yeah.
So that's not actually the only heinous thing they did this week, because they didn't report on the protest outside of the BBC.
Of course, because maybe they didn't have any reporters to send out to that protest.
They were all at the pro-Palestine rally.
Where's Bashir? Oh, Freddie's not here anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Unbelievable. You can't believe a word they say, by the way. I'm surprised at you. I'm going to go for my first one with LNER, the London North Eastern Railway, which was previously famous for having cracks in their trains because they bought some new trains, apparently, from Hitachi in Japan, put them together in the UK, then withdrew them all on the grounds that they had loads of cracks in them. Apparently they're going to put those back now because they haven't actually got cracks in them, and they just took them away as a precaution. However, they've got themselves in a right old tiz this week because they put out an announcement, as you might expect. You travel by train probably more than we do, saying, "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls." Came the ridiculously outrageous speech from the guards van, and apparently there was a traveller on the train whose name is Lawrence. We find out later that he actually is a member of the LGBTQ community for some other railway company, right? So he happens to be probably travelling in a sort of reduced way because he probably gets a discount to travel on the railways. He apparently then sends them a tweet saying, "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. So as a non-binary person, this announcement doesn't actually apply to me, so I won't listen." Now,
don't then.
You can say that was a pretty dopey thing to do. You can say, well, that's up to you, don't worry about it. But LNER, instead of just ignoring it, actually responded to it on Twitter and said, "I'm really sorry to see this. Our train manager should not be," wait for it, "using language like this."
Get out the cat of nine tails.
"And I thank you for bringing it to my attention. Please could you let me know which service you are on, and I will ensure they remain as inclusive as we strive to be at LNER." When he says, this PR person sending this tweet back, language like this, you would assume that, they must have been using the C word or swearing at somebody or, using some, horrible slang word to refer to some particular group of people, a minority or something. No, language like this now applies to "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls." You just think, what is going on?
What a disgusting thing to say.
Can you imagine? So now, presumably, anyone that gets on a train will not hear those words.
Yeah. Good afternoon, non-binary kids.
I mean, just ridiculous, isn't it?
And this guy though, what's his name? Lawrence, was it? And he had a non-binary female companion with him. Yeah. I'm not sorry if I can even say that. Charlotte. I mean, both of them.
She didn't like it either.
Just do one. Just tell them to do one.
No, I mean, all you want on a train is to let it take you from A to B without having to use a temporary bus service.
But it's obviously a cynical stunt because people know that if they put something on Twitter, that there's going to be, a whole hoo-ha in the LNER.
But wouldn't it be better if LNER just decided not to respond to it? Because then nobody would have noticed it. It would have gone away.
It emboldens people to make ever increasingly ridiculous claims to try and cause a Twitter storm.
Absolutely unbelievable. Let's go for your second one.
So my second is Humza Yousaf.
Oh yes.
Back on the list.
The world's favourite Scottish Justice Secretary. He hasn't been on it for a while.
So he, along with other people like Nicola Sturgeon, Nadia Whittome, Labour MP, a number of other Labour MPs as well, put out some, let's say ridiculous framing around what happened in Scotland, in Glasgow, with two men who were detained by immigration. So the Home Office had got Police Scotland to go and detain two men on immigration offences, and the locals in the area instantly mobilised, surrounded the van. Essentially, the mob prevented the Home Office from carrying out the law. And cynically, I think, Humza Yousaf and Nicola Sturgeon and others said that, and because they disagree with the Home Office's policies on immigration, it came out and made this about
They call it a hostile
targeting
atmosphere, and they actually said the hostile atmosphere is not welcome in Scotland.
Yeah,
as if it's a different country.
So
guess what, guys? It's not a different country.
They essentially abetted this mob and said, but the part of it that makes them a plank is that they said they made a big deal about this being during Eid, and they said that and bear in mind these two men were Sikhs, they were Indian nationals, and a human rights lawyer, Emma Anwar, negotiated their release from the police over the course of hours. They had people lying. Someone was lying underneath the van.
There was a few Palestinian flags being waved around as well.
They released them into this human rights lawyer's custody, and were escorted to the mosque, not the Gurdwara.
No.
And the way that they were spinning the narrative was that it was provocative of the Home Office to carry out this, essentially to execute immigration law.
And let's face it, we're told more or less
that these, Muslim holiday.
Right, but also these guys are illegal immigrants. Let's not, beat about the bush. That is the allegation. One of them had been here at least 10 years. Another one had been here 10 years but didn't speak English.
Well, one of them had applied for their visa to be, had appealed their visa running out and hadn't got it and hadn't left. I think he'd been here since 2016 without his visa. So they were rightfully detained. But because the Scottish want asylum policy to be devolved, this was a way of them yet again cynically not only using the situation but also trying to make this about evil England persecuting the Muslim community in Scotland by doing this during Eid, even though these two men weren't Muslim. And then you had people like Nadia Whittome coming out and saying, two Muslim men have been detained, she tweeted, even though that was completely inaccurate.
It weren't Muslims.
And they doubled down. They kept saying that this was provocation because it was during Eid.
Do you know what's also interesting about the whole story is that after the fact, they moaned and groaned, Humza Yousaf particularly, but also Nicola Sturgeon, that when they tried to call the Home Office, they couldn't speak to anybody important enough for them because they were upset that they were only given some junior minister to talk to. Like they were demanding to speak to the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, and she quite rightly was like, "I'm not talking to these bozos. Just carry out the UK immigration law that you are duty bound to do because you run a country which is part of the United Kingdom over which the UK Home Office has jurisdiction." And I mean, the other thing that people have suggested, and who knows whether this is true, but it was rather unusual in my view that they could organise such a mob so quickly while the actual arrest was going on. And the suggestion has been, and I have no way of knowing if it's true, that because as a courtesy the Home Office would have let the Scottish Government know that this was happening, that suddenly somebody in the Scottish Government saw an opportunity and tipped off some of these asylum.
So that's actually what happens in the US. They've had this with ICE when they try to detain illegal immigrants, and they get a tip off from local
so they can galvanise
so that they can mob and prevent the van from moving.
I'll tell you who else is would have been a decent plank on this issue as well is the police chief who called off the arrest because of the protests. And it was depicted
for public safety,
depicted by lefties as an inspiring moment when a community came to the rescue of two much loved members of their community. And so what does this mean then? So if they're arresting a couple of rapists or a murderer, then you just have a demonstration and the police chief
Nadia
will go,
Whittome was saying that this was an example of how direct action can be successful, but it's so undemocratic because it is the Scottish. It really should be more of a scandal than it is. The Scottish government abetting a mob to surround an immigration van and to negotiate with Police Scotland, who are executing the government.
Where else it doesn't stop there. You might not be surprised to know that the lovely Angela Rayner also got herself involved and said that she stood with Scotland, with Glasgow, on their fight against the battle.
She's nipping up to Glasgow to take the knee to them or something like
probably,
that. She
but
likes doing
it seems extraordinary that people who want to be in government, and I include people who are in government in that, like Nicola Sturgeon, don't wish to carry out the laws which they're actually duty bound to carry out. It's extraordinary.
But the message that is sent is anyone you like gets arrested, have a quick demo and the local police chief will let your friend off.
I know.
It's ridiculous.
And as the SNP think, the solution to everything is to try and paint an anti-English narrative. Those nasty Home Office orders coming over here and detaining people in our communities and being Islamophobic.
I know. Isn't it funny as well that all the way through the the election campaign, they stopped talking about independence and said they wouldn't talk about it because it's so important to get out of the COVID nightmare. As soon as they won, back to independence again and started asking for it. So, that will go on.
Yeah, talking of COVID, there wasn't much
cynical.
social distancing going on in that demonstration either.
Well,
No,
that's
and
another
actually-
thing. The police could have turned up and arrested them all for
Exactly,
actually being
they were
breaking
all
COVID.
over
That is
each other.
another reason why Humza Yousaf deserves to be on this list, is because he criticised the Rangers football fans
right.
who went completely
Yeah,
mad.
good point.
But he was criticising them on the
'Cause they
grounds
don't
of
want
them being
independence.
Very good
unsafe,
point,
but then
exactly.
went totally in support of these people surrounding the van.
I know, absolutely incredible stuff. Speaking of COVID, though, because we're not going to make much of an appearance on this for COVID, I'm going to carry over. Normally we carry over Harry and Meghan. We're going to carry Sage over this week, I think, because Sage have been completely useless this week, once again, by trying to hurl our freedom under the bus by saying, what about the Indian variant?
The Indian
we
variant.
can't reopen on June the 21st, which is already so far away they don't even know.
Yeah.
So we're going to just put them down there. What's your second one, Kevin?
Lord Lloyd Webber, Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Yes. My lord.
My Lord, Andrew Lloyd Webber, who has likened people who refuse to get the COVID-19 vaccine to drunk drivers who kill people.
Unbelievable.
That it is just as selfish not to choose not to have the vaccine as it is to have 10 pints and get behind the wheel and drive your car dangerously.
Sir Andrew, Lord Andrew, what's it got to do with you?
First of all, there's no equivalence between those two examples. It's a very different kind of situation. And secondly, I'm sick to death of people like him and indeed anyone else, usually from the left. To be fair, Lloyd Webber isn't from the left, but usually from the left, criticising people who have made a sentient decision not to get the
Mind you,
vaccine.
he's rich enough to be a supporter of the Labour Party, though.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's where they all. That's their.
He'll be there soon.
That's their home
He'll
area.
be there soon. So my point is that he said, I do think it's selfish. Just look at the way you could say, I would like to go out and have a drink tonight and drive home and accidentally I kill someone. So there's no equivalence there. It's a mad example anyway. It seems to me that nobody's going to go out and deliberately infect anybody with COVID, but it's completely wrong if we know the science. I was on the Oxford vaccine trial last week for this reason. So I'm sick of people pointing the finger at people who decide it's their decision. This is a question of freedom. We all would like enough people to take the vaccine in order to beat COVID, to stop the spread. Seems to be happening anyway. But if it was the majority of people decided not to take the vaccine, so be it. This is a really, really important issue, that every individual has the right to make that decision. And if their decision is, I think I won't get this vaccine, for whatever reason, it's got nothing to do with me or Mike or you, Emma, or Andrew Lloyd Webber. Stop this demonisation of sentient people who've made a completely rational decision not to get the vaccine. I can't stand it. And Lloyd Webber put the case very, very, very badly anyway.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? We've got this now two-tier society of people. One lot who think you must do this in order for everybody else to be fine, and the other lot who go, look, you can do whatever you want. I've done what I've wanted to do. I'm fine. And it really, I mean, it's as simple as that,
Haven't
really.
we reached herd immunity
Yeah.
already?
Well,
I think we have, haven't
About
we?
3 weeks ago.
I mean,
They say.
I'm the
But I
same
mean,
as you, Mike. I'm
yeah.
allergic to being told what to do.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
if they want to start talking about things like vaccine hesitancy, well, telling people that, essentially undermining their bodily autonomy and their right to decide what goes into
Also,
their
if
bodies.
I
It's
had
really
a sort of,
fundamental,
a
this.
bad case of the flu, I wouldn't go and knock on Andrew Lloyd Webber's door and say, what do you think I should do, Andrew? Because you're obviously a man with some great medical expertise. You
Quite.
should perhaps tell me what I should do best. Should I not go out because I've got the flu? Should I not come to one of your theatres because I might give the flu to somebody else?
But it's
Would
such
you
an
tell people to
unrealistic
stay
way
away?
of relating to the world.
Yeah.
Every day you go out, you take a risk. Every day there, you
course.
could catch something, or it's a completely hysterical response.
And if you take into account that most of the people in hospital right now with COVID, in hotspots like Bolton, where the grand total of 18 COVID sufferers are in hospital, 4 have died from the Indian variant. So the numbers aren't exactly huge, but every single one of them are people who haven't had the vaccine.
And people should be allowed to weigh up the evidence themselves,
Yeah, of course.
particularly if you're in a category that is low risk.
Yeah.
You should be able to
So
make
there's
those
also, I think,
decisions on the basis of the evidence yourself. The government should trust us.
The dangerous place where this goes is where do they stop vaccinating? Because I've had this question put to a few people. Is it going to end at 18? Are you going to try and vaccinate teenagers? Are you going to go all the way down to
vaccinating
kids
children.
age 5? Because I don't think a lot of parents would be very comfortable. I certainly wouldn't be comfortable with having my kids vaccinated.
But we have to. The main thing about this, though, is we have to stress to the bien pensant classes, who think that they're able to sort of proclaim from on high what everybody ought to be doing. That it's none of their, like Lloyd Webber, it is none of their business whether or not another grown, sentient adult decides not to have the vaccine. Stop demonising these people. It's their decision.
Yeah.
It's the same as with Harry. They think that they know best. They think that they're above everyone else and that they have some kind of qualification to lecture to
and they're
everyone.
really not.
Yeah.
And they're really not.
Yeah,
but there is.
just write a
I
musical.
call it the professor class. It's what they think that it's like they're all the Ramonas.
I mean,
can't get over
Andrew,
it.
Jesus Christ, superstar.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. That's the way. The only reason he did that was so
to get to that point.
Right, now I'm going to go with my second one, and I'm afraid you might have thought he's escaped this week, but he hasn't. It's Sir Keir Starmer, the world's most boring politician. Right? He managed to lose Hartlepool, managed to become the most unwanted fellow in a Bath pub when it was owned by a Labour supporter. He was told to get the hell out of my pub. He's now apparently trying to make himself more interesting. Which I think he's going to find is a very difficult thing to do.
It's an uphill struggle.
His aides are apparently touting around the possibility and the idea that somebody might want to make a fly-on-the-wall documentary about Sir Keir Starmer and what he gets up to, right, during the day when he's off camera and he's not in the House of Commons. I mean, can you imagine? He's the most boring man alive. I spoke to Rod Little today about it, right? And he said, I feel sorry for the fly on the wall.
Cruelty to animals.
It's literally going to be so boring that the fly will sort of
leave the
flies were harmed in the making of this documentary.
The fly will throw itself off the wall just to commit suicide to get away from the documentary makers. But he's also now announced that he's going to be going on Piers Morgan's Life Stories. Now, Piers Morgan's interviewed some interesting people on Life Stories. He's never introduced. I don't think he's ever introduced anybody quite this dull.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a possible contender.
Really,
Gordon Brown.
Gordon Brown,
almost
but even
boring.
Gordon Brown's more interesting.
Gordon Brown's
got a temper. Gordon Brown throws phones at
people. He's also got a good backstory, Gordon Brown.
He has, and he's also got a family which is quite interesting. He's had some tragedy in his life. Yeah. He's lost an eye. All of that stuff that you know about Gordon Brown. And he was part of what was a very successful Labour government over the course of 3 elections, right? Even though he could never win one.
What's a successful Labour government?
Now this tells you a lot, right? Because what you've just said is that actually Keir Starmer makes Gordon Brown seem interesting.
Yes, he
does.
He does.
Trouble.
He
that's
does.
the problem.
He does.
Because he's that wooden. He's that boring. I mean, only he could manage to actually lose ground to a government that is in, a reasonable amount of trouble over a number of things. No, not everybody's happy with Boris Johnson. They might be happy with him being a bit of a character. They might not care about the curtains. They might not give a stuff about Mystique. But they're not all happy about business people. Certainly not happy about the way that he's compensated them. Certainly not happy about the way that he's shut down the economy. Certainly not happy in Northern Ireland about how that's been messed up. There's so many places he could go.
You know that you're up a certain creek when Lord Adonis is suggesting
that's very
time
true.
To bring back Tony Blair.
Oh my God.
Mind you, he does do that every day.
Yes.
But
we may come back to that.
But the Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner thing, they're clearly now at each other's throats.
But he can't fire her. It's the battle. Reason
it's the battle for the Labour Party. So she's all over the papers at the weekend, giving interviews left, right, and centre. I'm Labour through and through, and I, born in Stockport, raised by Labour, the party of the people, and all this sort of stuff.
And all this stuff.
So she's giving all that.
And he's like, you're fired.
He's announcing he's going to go on to Piers Morgan's Life Story. And so all the people say, I think, right, the Labour people go, I think Angela might be a better bet. She's got a better backstory. What are these people? The X Factor?
I know. Yes. But this is the thing, if you're going to do a Life Stories episode, surely people want to know what you're about. Nobody cares what Keir Starmer's about.
It's also not going to serve him well because his life story is not a Labour life story.
Yeah,
that's not how he wants to be pitching himself.
Well, I mean, one of the
head
myths
of the
about
CPS.
Piers Morgan's posh life story.
Lawyer.
Yeah, but he also makes out that his dad was in some way a tool maker.
Owned the company,
make
didn't
rather unfair jokes about that. I think he was certainly, at the very least, he was successful at that. I mean, at the very least, he was a manager.
The ultimate tool.
I thought he owned the company.
I'm not sure if he owned the company, but it's the same when he talks about about his wife being in the NHS. She's a lawyer
Yeah.
who works in the NHS. She's not a nurse. She's not on the front line. Yeah. She's not, saving people's lives. She's getting compensation for people when they fight the NHS. That's what she's doing.
Well, when he was preaching to that landlord, that's exactly the brand.
His problem.
That's exactly what it will.
I'm not going to take lectures from the likes of
No.
you. What, you mean a member of the public?
Yeah, a member of the public.
Exactly,
And somebody who
exactly.
owns a business, and somebody who used to vote Labour.
Yeah,
So why would he want to put his life story on the table when it will make all of that? It will make it apparent why he thinks
Because
he's
he's
elected to the public
delusional,
like
because he
that.
gets everything wrong. He doesn't.
Also,
he doesn't understand that sort
being
of
a
thing.
policy wonk. All he will do is prove how incapable he is of actually having any sort of humour about him, because he's not a funny man. He never makes jokes. He doesn't feel comfortable clearly in situations with ordinary people. Because after that famous Bath episode, do you remember when he scuttled back to London and was then pictured outside a pub in Camden Town
With a pint.
Which hadn't had anything drunk
And they said
out of
about
it.
time too.
And he was with two other people
Better late than never.
whose drinks were half done. So he clearly just sat down and gone, "Do you mind if we take a picture?"
Yeah,
And
or
it just
rather,
looks
on the train
embarrassing.
on the way back, all his spads came up with this brilliant
Yeah.
ruse. Why don't we take a picture of you with a pint
Yeah.
and say better late than never? That'll get us out.
I mean, they're not
of this
great at
trouble.
So
travelling, are
out of
they,
touch.
these people? I mean,
No.
remember what happened to Jeremy Corbyn when he had to find a seat on the floor on that train and it all got exposed as a complete load of old rubbish.
Stay away from trains and
stay away from
pubs.
trains and pubs, guys. That's it. Your third, Emma?
My third is the RSPB.
Yes.
So there is a 19-year-old bird watcher who was being given an honorary doctorate, and
She calls herself doctor. She's not shy in coming forward. She calls herself doctor even though she didn't actually earn it.
Yeah, so it's an honorary doctorate. She's 19, and she complained to the RSPB that their graphics for bird watching were sexist.
Yeah.
Because the pictures of the female birds were smaller than the male birds, even though apparently
Feathers were flying.
apparently
about
in the RSPB bird watching manual they are the same size.
Uh-huh.
There could be a good reason for that, in that male birds tend to be prettier and
Bigger.
have
Yes.
nicer
Oh, yeah,
plumage.
They do.
It's the same.
and- but-
Same for us humans.
But
Emma.
Not in all cases.
The reason,
No, I guess not.
The reason why the RSPB are on my plank list is because they immediately capitulated
Yes.
and said that they would look into it and that they would review.
And this is the problem, isn't it? A bit like the LNER
Exactly.
Yes,
story.
exactly.
Instead of just going, yeah, all right, calm down. There's a reason why we do it, and this is why. Instead, they go, oh, thank you for telling us. We're
They should
really
just
sorry.
they should just go. Do me a favour.
Yeah,
Go
get out of
away.
Yeah, but this is the latest instalment on. Firstly, it's like the Greta effect.
Yes.
Where you have these young people who are held up as experts, and
Right.
I mean, this girl, to be fair on her, she
I've
has.
had her on my show.
She's one.
What, the
she,
bird watching
Yeah.
woman?
She was the
Yeah.
youngest person in the world to see
What was she like?
5,000
She's
bird
a nice
species
kid.
or
She's a
something.
nice kid, and what she did is she drew all these pictures. She sort of made her own book, or she started posting it online.
So you did her on the show before
and,
any of
then
this happened?
and then she had, this was about like 6 months ago, and she had like 1 million followers, and so publishers spotted it, and she wrote,
Right.
gave her a publishing deal, and she became very much the sort of young face
Yeah.
of conservation. So, I remember.
She's,
dealing
of
with
course, a climate
Yeah.
specialist. as
She-
well,
Oh,
isn't she?
Of
her profile
course,
on Twitter is
yeah,
her
yeah.
protesting.
Yeah.
I mean, she's obviously a very
She's a nice
exceptional young lady.
Right on.
But the RSPB, it's the same with all of these different institutions, like the National Trust. They just need to have a backbone
Yeah.
and say, look, I get that you're trying to find problematic, because she was saying it's about sexist birding or something like sexism in birding.
I mean, I have to say, I've been
They just need to tell these young people, look, I know that you think this is problematic, but
It's really not.
take a breath.
Yeah, it's really not.
really not the problem that you think it is.
No.
They have been sort of bred to be overly sensitive.
Yeah.
And the reason why they do, it's the same with the Greta effect. They think that they know how to create a better world. They think that the way to do that is by picking apart all of the problematic things that the older generation are blind
Yes.
to, because they think that the older generation
But it's
are
terribly
ignorant.
middle class as well, isn't it?
But
Of
it's
course it
also
is. You've got more important
it's
things to
also
worry
such
about.
a distraction from real issues. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yes.
really, sexism in ornithology?
Yeah.
Is it really a problem?
I really don't think it is. I mean, even if it is a problem, it's in ornithology, which is not. I mean, it's not even an Olympic sport. For
Not many people are going to see those posters.
No, really not.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to go into one of the hides down in Sussex this weekend, I think, and see if I can find any posters which trigger me, which I can
As I
complain
say,
to the
use my
RSPB about.
rubbish bin technique. Just
Yeah.
throw
Maybe
beer
I'll
cans in.
take a pen and draw moustaches on
Yes,
them.
yes,
But
yes.
still,
Smoke
good
a
on that
cigarette,
girl for being
flick it.
Oh,
interested
for
in
God's
birds.
sake. Right, so, Kevin, your third?
It is Alastair Campbell
Ah, yes.
for his week on Good Morning Britain, sitting in Piers Morgan's former chair. Susanna Reid and the team seemed to greet him as if he was the new Richard Dimbleby or Walter Cronkite. He was a disaster.
I've got some bad news for him. He wasn't.
He was a disaster from start to finish. I mean, there's no reason why he should be a good TV presenter because he's got no experience in it, but he knows about the media, he knows about...
He's worked in the media all his life.
He knows about communication, but he did show an extraordinary lack of aptitude for this job. And at the low point, the nadir of his dreadful reign of horror on Good Morning GMB, he killed off the Queen.
Superb work.
He just said, of course, after the death of her Queen, we're all mourning Prince Philip.
Yeah.
No, that's the wrong way around.
Oh, no.
And then they had to come back and said, I think I made a bit of a mistake there. But
he had to apologise.
The man's not a natural.
But he was there partly because he has his own mental health issues. He suffers from depression, so it was Mental Health Week, so it was all very worthy for GMB to do this. But it was a bit dangerous of them because, Ofcom, the broadcasting watchdog, that's in charge of checking whether or not mainstream broadcasters like ITV, BBC, Talk Radio are balanced, politically balanced. This guy, Campbell, sat there screaming his head off about what a horror Boris was all week, and at one point, and sort of screaming and shouting at Matt Hancock. So at one point, Susanna Reid...
It's not exactly calming, is it?
No, Susanna Reid said, well, the thing about Boris... He goes,
This is why you've never been given a mug before.
He goes, don't call him Boris, call him Johnson.
Right.
And then Matt Hancock came on as a guest, and he starts saying, when's the public inquiry into the COVID crisis then? You won't have it until after the election, will you? And so, so you can get voted back in.
And then he also did what everybody wanted him to do as well, which is bring back Tony Blair.
Yeah, and then of course
that was an abomination.
Then he gets the only interview that he could really land. That's with his own boss, Tony Blair, which was 10 minutes of television that we'll never get back from our lives. I mean, it was just dreadful.
Horrendously embarrassing.
Yesterday's man
really
interviewing yesterday's man. And as you say, Emma, I mean, so... Crawley, it was so Uriah Heepish.
He was describing how in Tony Blair's book he'd complimented Alastair Campbell. Alastair Campbell was saying, reminding Tony of how Tony had complimented him.
The sort of level.
Luckily for me, it's on when I can't watch it. So
the level of the interview was sort of Tony, of all your triumphs, which was the greatest? So he killed off the Queen. He broke Ofcom broadcasting rules all week by screaming about Labour and how horrible the Tories were, and then brought on that old dinosaur Blair, so they could compliment each other about how great they were. And of course, at the end of all this, it looks as if GMB was so thrilled with his uselessness they're going to have him back.
The interview with Tony Blair as well was an unmitigated failure, because they were asking him about vaccine hesitancy, and so it had the opposite effect.
Did he still have the long hair? Has he cut his hair
I
yet?
think he just had it cut, but they did a long sort of dialogue about how terrible he looked with his long hair. And he was talking about vaccine hesitancy, and he was saying that he obviously trying to encourage people to take the vaccine, saying that he thought the best way to encourage people to take the vaccine would be to lay out all of the evidence. It's like, Tony. Don't you be talking about evidence, Tony.
I mean, Alastair Campbell shouldn't have missed a trick there. He should have gone, don't worry, I'll cook you up some evidence and I'll bring it straight along just after the show. That's what I did the last time.
It will have exactly the opposite
It'll be like those weapons of mass destruction all over again, Tone. No problem. Sweep it under the carpet.
I'll get hold of Martin Bashir, he can join in.
But surely Tony Blair saying there's evidence that you should have the vaccine is going to make all of the people who are vaccine hesitant go, hang on a minute.
It's a bit like, Campbell came into the tent of shame once and accused Boris Johnson of lying. And I went, that's pretty good coming from you.
Yeah,
You're the guy that sexed up an entire dossier that led to a war.
Yeah, Tony, but word of advice, Tone and Alastair, don't go on telly and start talking about public inquiries. Public inquiries are not a safe environment for you
And also,
two.
the funny thing is that the reason why people say they were such a great sort of government and what a great success they were was because they won elections. They don't actually say because of anything they did. But the Labour Party, who want them back, and Lord Adonis and people like him, go, yeah, but they won 3 elections. You go, yeah, but They won 3 elections on what were at least very flimsy premises, and we ended up going into things that we didn't know we were going to go into. And I think if we had known that, we probably wouldn't have voted for them.
And posterity has not been kind.
It really hasn't.
I'll give them something though. They were clever. That's why they won elections. Adonis and the new mob.
Well, to be fair, Adonis has never won anything.
I didn't mean Adonis.
He's been appointed.
Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner, and the new mob are not clever. That's why they'll never win an election.
No. And speaking of people that win elections, Sadiq Khan is my third. He hasn't been on for a while, not least because during the period of the election coverage, we couldn't really put any planks into the list if they were running for election, which means he's dropped quite a fair way down the top 10 on Plank of the Year. But I'm sure
he'll climb out of that
hole because, of course, the first
thing
he did was despite the fact that he had one of the biggest leads of all time in any election last time around, he nearly lost it. So Sean Bailey, a man that nobody really believed could win, almost won and was running neck and neck for quite a long time.
He ran a phantom campaign, didn't he? I was sure.
He did.
He hardly knew.
Even the Tories didn't want him running, and they didn't back him either. They were so sure.
Should have done.
Well, do you imagine? I mean, all we now need to. I mean, I don't even think Sadiq can run for a third term.
But he can't. No, he can't.
But they could. But the Tories could win it.
I mean, it was so close without Sean Bailey being any good, really.
I know. Yeah, exactly. I know. I mean, no offence to him. He didn't really have a presence. Nobody really knew exactly who he was. And it could have been a very different story. Yeah. But so he gets in anyway, by the skin of his teeth. He then starts promising to kind of speak for everybody, and then immediately doesn't speak for anybody apart from himself. And he won't speak for me. He won't even speak to me, never mind for me. We keep asking him to come on the show, and he keeps refusing. And I actually sent him a tweet saying, you don't seem to want to hear from my voice. Why don't you want to listen to my voice? And of course, he didn't answer. But the worst thing has just happened, and it's happened this week. I don't know what your view is on e-scooters, but I find them to be the absolute scourge of London at the moment, where people are committing crimes. They've just done a survey, I think, recently, where thousands of crimes have been committed, from all the way down to sort of person snatching, all the way up to actually knocking people over on pavements and really hurting people.
Dangerous.
Somebody in Paris has been killed by one. There was a girl who was in the papers today, who was a former very successful young woman. She died on one.
We've had a death.
Yeah, she's died on one, but she wasn't. She didn't knock anybody over. But they've now decided, TfL, Transport for London, which is overseen by his office, Sadiq Khan's office, they've decided to have a rent trial period of 12 months in London. So there'll be like the Boris bikes, basically. You'll be able to pick one up and you'll be able to drop it off, and it's going to be available in Ealing, Hammersmith, Fulham, Kensington, Chelsea, Richmond, City of London. It's going to start on June the 7th. They haven't had any consultation on this. They haven't asked anybody if they want it. So what it's going to mean is, in addition now to having all of these illegal scooters, they're going to now have a load of legal ones. Who knows what's going to happen? How many? I mean, I don't know how many.
Presumably a load of people who aren't used to riding them.
Yeah, well, that's the problem.
And how legal are they now? I mean, they are motorised vehicles.
Well, apparently they come because actually, funnily enough, I've been talking to Mr. Loophole about this. Nick Freeman, who's a lawyer, and he has been very concerned about them because they're electric. Technically speaking, they are vehicles.
Yes,
right?
I know.
So they're not like bicycles, which are not regulated.
No,
they're technically regulated.
But they're allowed on the pavement.
But they're not allowed on the pavement because they're vehicles.
They do go on the pavement.
They're on the pavement.
They're all over the place. They're on the pavement. They're in bike lanes.
Technically, there should be a licence for them.
They're also meant to be limited in speed. Now, normally speaking, you would say, well, okay, if you're going to limit the speed of them to 20 miles an hour, you can make them available for rent. But the ones that people use at the moment, those huge ones, they can go like 40, 50 miles an hour. And they're really quick and really dangerous. And people have been done for being drunk on them. And it just seems to me to be a recipe for disaster. I mean, London's roads are already screwed.
Yeah.
You can't get anywhere. The chances of you actually knocking somebody over or, hitting a bicycle or now hitting a scooter, I mean, it's just ridiculous. And he thinks this is a good idea. It's all part of this kind of madness that they've all got of ridding London.
But he also thought it was a good idea to have David Hockney do the...
Oh, yes. That was the other thing.
The Piccadilly Circus.
Yeah.
£7 million he's spending on this campaign that was part of. And
is that what David Hockney's getting?
Artists were complaining that he didn't... Hockney doesn't even live in London. He could have picked
He
could have picked a young artist who's from London, who's been struggling because of the pandemic to do it. Instead, he had this weird 7-year-old style drawing by Hockney.
Where the S of circus didn't fit, so it's down the line. It's deliberately childlike.
It looks like he did it in a panic on an iPad.
But those are the 3 each that we are required to come up with. So we've now got 9. When you carry Sage over, that'll be 10. So what we've got to do now, if you remember, is reduce it all down to 1 each. So Emma, why don't you pick your favourite one of Kevin's?
Mine were.
Tell us what yours were.
The BBC for the Martin Bashir Omnishambles ongoing. Andrew Lloyd Webber, Lord Lloyd Webber, for presuming that he.
I don't know why I say that. I just keep whenever I hear the word
my
Lord, my Lord.
For presuming that he has the right to proclaim on high about whether or not people take the vaccine and to condemn people who don't. What's it got to do with him? Why does he think he has the right to do this? And lastly, Alastair Campbell for the worst week of breakfast television in the history of breakfast television.
And that's saying quite a lot. Do you know, last week we had GMB as one of the planks of the week, but he's managed to keep them in there for the second week.
They could have been nominated a second time this week for their weird hugging demonstration.
He looked, by the way, we didn't cover the fact he looked for the whole week very, very shifty.
Yes.
Ali Ross from The Sun described it. He looked like a shoplifter who's just seen the police walk in. He's gone like this.
Well, of course, you wouldn't have to worry if you're a shoplifter these days, because the police, if they are walking in, are presumably just getting a sandwich or arresting somebody for not being binary.
Yeah, they come to check whether or not
they're not actually arresting shoplifters.
The shoplifters' human rights are being preserved.
No, absolutely not. So, which one of those do you
Campbell.
like? Alastair Campbell, very good. Okay, so Alastair gets put into the top 3. Okay, Kevin, you want to pick mine? Mm-hmm. It's LNER, the greatest railway company in the world. Sir Keir Starmer, or Sadiq Khan.
Well, I mean, they're all very strong contenders, but
what a crop.
I mean, for an example of once in a generation utter stupidity, I'm going to have to go for LNER.
I think it's got to be
ladies
LNER.
And gentlemen,
and
boys
also,
and girls.
We do like nowadays to try and put people in there perhaps who won't appear all the time.
Yeah.
You know, where Sir Keir, Sadiq.
It can't be Harry and Sadiq every week.
Well, it can't. And your 3 are?
Harry.
I'm choosing these.
Harry, Humza Yousaf, or the RSPB.
No, yeah, you are, aren't you?
Yeah. And so, again, very strong contenders, but I'm saying... actually, it is your turn, isn't it? It is your turn.
It's my turn.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Sorry.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
Yeah.
Over to you, mate.
I think it should be Humza Yousaf, because Prince Harry will still remain. He'll still be in there, and they're so far ahead at the moment.
What is it, a 20
I
point
think
lead?
20 to 30 points ahead of everybody else, because they get points every week. I think we go with Humza Yousaf. So now all we have to do is figure out the top 3: Alastair Campbell, Humza Yousaf, Scottish Justice Secretary, and LNER. So, what do you reckon?
For me, I mean, this isn't the decision, but my decision would be LNER, because, as I say, we're used to this woke rubbish, this absolute asinine nonsense they assail us with day in, day out. But you won't often get something quite so ludicrous as a company saying,
also, can you imagine sitting on a train, listening to some announcement and going, "That's outrageous. I'm going to send them a tweet to say how it doesn't apply to me."
So, what's going to be on the LNER trains? The guard will come on and go, "All right, everyone."
Yeah, buffet's open. Shut up. Don't be so offensive.
Anyway, so I think that
you
is.
You think LNER? Do you go with that?
I'm inclined to LNER as well.
I think it is. It's so ridiculous.
I think it's also because I think they deserve to be laughed at for the self-flagellation rather than criticised. We should just laugh at them for it.
I think so. All right, so let's make LNER number 1. I think Humza Yousaf at number 2. Because, I mean, he deserves to be in there for all sorts of reasons. And Alastair Campbell, you feel a bit sorry for him really now, haven't you?
No.
I mean, what's he going to do next? What's for my next trick? You say he's coming back?
Well, apparently...
Because it went so well?
Well, yeah, they were all tweeting what a great job he'd done. I mean, he did a terrible job, but I suspect...
It's all relative, I suppose.
ITV is...
Better than Alex Beresford.
The word, yeah...
My
dog would be better than Alex Beresford. Which way is the weather going, Alex? But ITV is so dim that they have no idea whether anybody's any good or not. So the word is he might be coming back for more unwanted stints.
But actually, it is good watching because it's so embarrassing.
Yeah.
So in a way, I feel like it actually fills the void left by Pierce for it to be just that cringy and embarrassing.
Cringe TV, that could be the future. future. Well, that's not what we do here at Talk Radio TV. So number 3 then, coming in, Alastair Campbell. He may be back. Humza Yousaf, Scottish Justice Secretary, number 2. Number 1, the London and North East Railway Service, for saying you cannot any longer say, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you are the plank of the week. We'll see you next time.